Columbia.
Congrats to the Gamecocks women on another national championship.
A Cumulus Media station.
The Halftime Show, sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina.
Not feeling like yourself? Call the Men's Clinic at 803-875-MENS.
The Halftime Show on the Game Network and the 107.5 The Game app.
$12 o'clock on your Wednesday afternoon now. Welcome in. It is the Halftime Show now. Tyler Head, Terry Ford will be along with me in just a moment. Fashionably late as always. We finally got the top 25 in the first college football, the last 10 years of it, right? So it was largely irrelevant, just sports writers giving their opinion on who they think the best teams are. So it holds no weight. But these rankings do matter, because these rankings will determine who will be in the inaugural field for the 12-team college football playoff and get a chance to play for the national championship. And you can't really argue with what they have at the top. Oregon at number 1, Ohio State at number 2, Georgia at number 3, and Miami at number 4. 4 of the best teams in the country. Oregon probably looks like the most well-rounded team as of right now. Now, they didn't start the season that way. They had their respective struggles against Idaho and Boise State, but they've since clicked it in gear. They have what, technically speaking, is the best win in the entire country over Ohio State in that wild game in Eugene, Oregon, a couple of weeks ago, and they look very well-rounded. Dillon Gabriel is potentially a Heisman Trophy candidate, if not winner. That's leading the offense. They got a good defense led by Dan Lanning, who, of course, is a defensive-minded head coach, and they have a schedule that's very workable from here on out. Now, they do potentially have a rematch with Ohio State coming at Indianapolis for the Big Ten Championship game, so that could shift things around a little bit, but no denying that they, for all intents and purposes, look like the best team in the country. Ohio State after them, again, after that tight loss in the lapse of judgment for Will Howard at the end of that game. Not really knocked a whole lot for that. Now, they have not looked perfect the past couple of weeks, but they did have a key win against what the AP had deemed to be a top 5 team in Penn State, and Penn State being a top 10 team in the eyes of the ranking committee, last night as well. So quality win for them at number 2. Georgia at number 3. Of course, huge win against Texas, who is deemed to be number 5. Only loss coming to Alabama, who is seen as the number 11 team in the country right now, though you wouldn't say they're very well-rounded. Again, defense plays well, as it always does under Kirby Smart. Carson Beck just has fallen off a cliff here as of late. They can't get the running game going. Now, as we talked about in the last hour, Georgia is always a team that's going to be capable of flipping a switch at any time and looking like the dominant Georgia we've seen in years past, but they're not quite there yet. And if they want to contend with Ohio State, if they want to contend with Oregon, then they're going to have to kick things into gear for this stretch run of not only the regular season, but the college football playoff as well.
Well, first we get the first, poll. Everybody loses their mind because that's what we do on the first poll. But what always is interesting to me is, once again, we get the example, this is done by human beings.
Yep.
Who aren't very objective. And the things they say matter really don't matter in certain cases, right?
Of course.
I mean, for an example, BYU has a better resume than a few teams ahead of them.
Yeah.
But because the Big 12 stereotype and the way the Big 12 just beats each other up, BYU is looked at far and away worse than Miami, even though BYU has got better wins than Miami does, right?
Yes, up to this point.
I mean, BYU took out SMU, who was sitting at 13.
Yep.
BYU dismembered Kansas State. Now, both those games were in Provo. But BYU is sitting there at 9 behind Indiana, who, no offense, because I love SIG and I love the story of the Hoosiers. Indiana has beaten Bloomington Middle School.
But they've beat them in the way you would expect them to beat
They
them.
crushed them.
Yeah, like that's what you're supposed to do.
But really, is beating up on the skinny pale kid and taking his lunch money is impressive. I mean, beating him down to where he's crawling to the school, is that more impressive than beating up another bully?
It's not, but let me pose this hypothetical to you. Mm-hmm. Let's say...
All right, because Indiana plays in the Big Ten and BYU plays in the Big 12.
Right.
If you swap them, put Indiana in the Big 12 undefeated, smacking folks, and you put BYU in the Big 10 undefeated, guess who's going to be higher up? BYU.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame wasn't Notre Dame, would they be as high as they are? I mean, they lost to Northeastern Illinois School of Horticulture.
I've been saying it all morning. They're not being penalized enough for what's probably the worst loss out of any ranked team to a 500 MAC team. And that's just, I mean, yeah, if they were undefeated, obviously they'd be a whole lot higher. But I think 10 is very generous.
Because this committee, this sport is always dying to make Notre Dame matter.
It is.
Always.
And again, look, they're never going to admit to you about biases or whatever, but you can't help it to a degree. It's just built in. And if you've been a part of college football for a long time, like the people in these committee rooms are, you probably do it without thinking about it.
That's the problem is you just fall into that narrative, right? Just like Texas. Now Texas is deserving their love the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But they've been doing the same thing to Texas for years because of all the money. It's not even the great lineage of Texas football. It's the money and power of Texas football.
Well, it's kind of one of those things like if I said, all right, tell me who's going to win the game between Texas and Northwestern or Ohio State and Northwestern in 2032. You'd say, well, it's probably going to be Ohio State. You have no context of what those two teams are going to look like. You just assume, well, Ohio State's usually pretty good and Northwestern's usually not, so I'm going to take Ohio State.
Sure. I mean, we have this, like Oklahoma this year. Everybody, despite the fact Oklahoma had lost their entire offensive line, their starting quarterback, their offensive coordinator, and they had injuries at wide receiver, everyone automatically thought Oklahoma was going to be really good.
Because that's just what they do.
Because Oklahoma's always really good. I get it. And even when they started to struggle from the get-go almost, oh, they're Oklahoma. They'll be fine. Why? Because they're Oklahoma. What other reason? Oh, they're Oklahoma. Okay, give me something that you can really, I can sink my teeth into. I'll tell you. Oh, they're Oklahoma. They're always good. So, yeah, we have these built-in stereotypes and biases, especially in college sports, football and basketball. I mean, if you're a brand that's been successful for a period, you get the benefit of the doubt, which I understand to a point. But here's my problem with that. If you're a committee whose job is to put the best teams into a playoff field, you got to look at bias and say, get out of the room. You got to look at stereotype, get out of the room. You got to look at your subjectivity and your likes and dislikes and get out of the room and objectively look at these teams' resumes. That's all.
And Wes brought up a really good point in the last hour when we were talking about Clemson. Who is, number 23 at 6-2, despite the fact that if you watch them play their games against Louisville and Georgia, they didn't look like they belonged in the field with either one of those teams. But Wes brought up a really good point that I think, and this is not supposed to be this way, when you look at the fact that Clemson came into the season as a top 10 team in the AP poll and has fallen down accordingly based on that preseason top 10 ranking or wherever they were, that's why they're at 23. If this was truly what the committee says they do, where they break everything down, they don't look at the AP poll, they didn't look at any of these other things that you've done in prior years and just try and determine who the best 25 teams were, Clemson wouldn't be in the top 25 based on how they played against the two best opponents they faced. But it is this perception of, well, they were a top 10 team coming into the year and they've fallen off a little bit, so they're 23 instead.
Yeah, but Clemson's got big wins over, and they beat, and then they... Yeah. Well, Missouri's the same way.
Yeah.
Missouri's done nothing this year but underachieved. The wins they have, they scrape by. Oh, they should have lost to Vandy.
They should have lost to Vandy.
I mean, they've scraped by this year in the wins they do have. And in the losses, it's not like they've been super competitive really all season to the level they were last year.
They've lost by over 30 points in their two games to Texas A&M and Alabama.
And by the way, who beat Texas A&M by, 18?
South Carolina. Or 24.
24, rather. Yeah,
24.
Yeah. I mean, 44-20. My math is so good. So you beat that team. And look, it was a home game. Okay, you beat them by 24. And Missouri got trucked. Was that game at College Station? Or was that game in Columbia?
That game was in
Missouri?
College Station.
College Station. I couldn't remember. So at the end of the day, Missouri shouldn't be in this ranking either. But they were ranked high to start the year. They came off a very successful season, and everybody's given the benefit of the doubt because they were in that poll. And that goes back to my point with human beings in these polls. And it went back to my point last year with Florida State getting screwed. The I think system stepped up.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got the I think system, the bias system, they've always been good. Well, they were ranked. No, if you're going to look at a resume, you know what we should do with this? That committee, and they won't do this because it makes sense, put blind resumes up on the board with no schools attached to them. Blind resumes. The metrics that we talk about that matter, quote unquote matter,
Yeah.
put those metrics up on the board, maybe some other metrics as well, and make it blind resumes always across and make them vote like that.
Well, and it's funny because anytime we do like the ratings reveal show, especially for the final one that determined up in years past who the 4 teams were, they would always take like 5, 6, and 7, or excuse me, like 4, 5, and 6, and give you that blind resume thing. Hey, here it's Team A, strength of schedule's this, strength of record's that, win-loss against top 25, whatever, and give you that blind resume. And we always kind of assume, well, they must do that in the committee rooms, right? We know that for sure. And I would assume to say they actually probably don't do that.
No.
To where they are looking at the logo. They are looking at the name every single time. And that is, again, whether they know it or not, driving their thought process on what these teams should be.
Sure, or their built-in likes and dislikes. Like I said yesterday, they might have a buddy that works in the athletic department at a school, and they want to give them love, or maybe maybe they have some connection to or conference, like we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, you're going to look out for your conference.
I mean, that's why you wipe the names and the logos off. You go Team A, Team B, Team D, and you go to Z or whatever. That's 26 still, right? You get to like 26 letters of the alphabet, and you put 26 teams on that board, and you go down on your little tablet thing, and you pick, okay, I'm taking Team C number 1, Team E's number 2. And then when it's done and locked, then you reveal it.
And that's the tricky part of this, because there's always going to be the human element. And with what this committee is, it's formed of athletic directors and people that have been involved in the sport for a long time. The committee chair is the athletic director at Michigan. Do you think he's giving Ohio State the benefit of the doubt on anything? Probably not, because that's his bitter rival. Now, again, they're in the conference, and they do make a lot of money by having Ohio State being a really good team. But still, there's going to be that bias of like, well, if it comes down to splitting hairs, he's probably going to put Oregon over Ohio State, right?
Because that's still giving him Big Ten money.
It is.
So, of course he would, because he can't stand that school down south. And that's the kind of stuff. So when you see these and everybody gets aggravated, and I understand it, but what do you expect from human beings?
Yeah. And again, college sports are just designed in this way where we don't have this automatic process like the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, whatever, where it's like, all right, win this subset of the league, your conference, your division, whatever it may be, and you're good. And we seed it accordingly, and there's no bias to it. You just either win or you don't, and you get in or you don't. But this is all leaving up. Same thing we do with March Madness. Same thing we do with the FCS playoffs, the soccer playoffs in college. It's all based on committees and opinions.
You know why? Because that's the way college sports wants it. They don't want what the NFL has or the NBA or Major League Baseball or the NHL. They want this. And be honest with you, the folks who cover college football and basketball, they want this too because it gives them something to talk about.
That's what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Obviously, we get some Shane Beamer sound from yesterday's presser and continue our conversation about the college football playoff poll that just came out yesterday right here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Halftime show. Terry Ford and Tyler Head here on The Game. Spent a lot of time in the opening riff going over the college football playoff poll that just popped out. No, South Carolina did not make it. A 3-loss Louisville did. And look, is South Carolina's resume better? Yeah. Louisville beat Clemson at Clemson. Okay. South Carolina knocked off the 10th ranked team in the country and beat them by 24. Yeah, one was on the road, one was at home. Okay. But again, this is the way this is me. And I could be totally off because I wasn't in the room when they were doing their poll. And it's the first poll. If South Carolina handles their business, they'll be in this poll.
They should.
I mean, if you run the table, you'll be in this thing in some way in the poll. You won't be competing for a playoff spot most likely, but you'll be in the poll.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt and Carolina are both playing to be in next week's top 25 this weekend.
Absolutely.
And look, is either team having an opportunity to get in the college football playoff? No. I think being outside the top 25 should probably kill any hope Carolina fans of making the 12-team playoff. But being ranked by the people that deem who is good enough to play for the national championship is worth something and a positive for your program.
Sure. And, again, you just keep winning. I say it about any of the people on this list, in this poll list, you just keep winning and you handle everything. You will be able to navigate this poll and move up it if you just keep posting W's. Because guess what? There are going to be people in this poll highly ranked who are going to lose.
Yep.
It's coming.
Yep.
Ohio State and Indiana have to play. We got an elimination game with LSU and Alabama this weekend.
Yep.
Ole Miss is playing for their life. Every Saturday they tee the ball up now.
They play Georgia this weekend.
Exactly.
Georgia plays Tennessee next weekend, the weekend after, whenever it is.
So there's going to be people beating each other up. So if you just win and handle your business, you move up. And if there was massive chaos on a high level, a 3-loss team might sniff it. I don't think that it's going to get to that degree because I saw, it was a Heather Dinich, I forget who wrote it, 20 or 22% of teams still have a chance to have 2 losses this year.
Yep.
That means a 3-loss team most likely would not get into this field. Now, again, if you get a lot of upsets, maybe somebody with 3 losses could sniff it. But if you're a 3-loss team right now, you make your plans for a bowl game that won't include the college football playoff. That's all. But yeah, you'd like to be in the poll. And does South Carolina have a better resume than maybe some of the folks in the bottom of this poll? Yeah, absolutely. But again, this is done by human beings. And I really think, and this is how dopey I think it is, but I just really believe, because mentally we look at things like, for example, they have a sale, ready? And the cost of that shirt is $50, Tyler.
Right.
The cost of that shirt is $49.99, Tyler.
That's a much better deal.
Thank you, because what do you see in the front of the whole a 4?
It's the psychology of seeing a lower number.
Right. So I think it might have worked in reverse in this, like a Louisville situation. Louisville's 6-3. What's South Carolina?
5-3. That extra, the fact that Louisville's not had an extra bye and Carolina has, could be the difference. And the fact that 6th win happened to be against what the AP poll deemed to be a top, 10th, 11th, something like that, a fringe top 10 team on the road in their venue,
who had been slugging people in the face ever since they got slugged in the face by Georgia.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the psychological thing of seeing a number greater than another number to some people matters.
You could be very, very right. That's true.
It could be something as silly as that. But we're dealing with human beings. We can't forget that. All right, Shane Beamer, yesterday, you heard it right here on 107.5 The Game here in Columbia. Shane talking to the media. And I think it's our boy Jack Veltri asked this question.
Because David's still in Las Vegas. He couldn't ask the first question.
I think it's so funny.
And I love Beamer's red eye. Couldn't catch a red eye.
That was pretty good. Anybody who's here, I give mad props to. That was pretty funny. All right, here's Shane answering the question that Jack asked about, okay, how do you stop from being overhyped or everybody gets too geeked about the past win and to get them refocused for the next big game?
I would think it's very similar from that standpoint in that we got beat by Florida down in Gainesville. And I talked to the team in the locker room after the game that was obviously not us, what we just put on display out there in Gainesville that night. But we had the opportunity over the next 2 weeks to change the trajectory of the program. And when we beat Tennessee, we just reiterated that we didn't say we just had 1 week to do it. We had the next 2 weeks, and we need to continue to build on that, and that nobody thinks you're going to be able to do it 2 weeks in a row. The Tennessee was a flash in the pan. There's no way you could do it the next week against Clemson. So leaning into that is what we did 2 years ago. And I think this year is very similar. We talk about last week, we said they remember November, and they do. It wasn't just they remember November 2nd. It's what you do the whole month as well. And I showed the team the clip this morning of Josh in the press conference with you guys the other night where he said 1, 2, 3. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4? Is that faux? We got last one. We got to get the next one. So that's what he said. Exactly. A great message that they'll remember what we do throughout this month, not just the first game of the month as well. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that think, man, they played great against Texas A&M. There's no way they can do it 2 weeks in a row against another good team. And it's a challenge for us to see if we can. So I would say that as well.
Well, remember, coming off the beatdown in Norman, there was shame you got a bye week and lose all this momentum. Well, you came out of the bye week and you spiked Texas A&M right in the grill.
Yep.
Oh, well, you played so well. Can you do it back-to-back weeks? Now you got to go on the road and play a 6-win Vandy team that's been looking pretty good. And can you get up to so much of, and we talk about bias and perception, the perception of South Carolina football. Well, you can't do it 2 weeks in a row. You're South Carolina football. Or, man, it's a shame you lost that momentum coming off that bye. Can you get that together for A&M? Because, you are South Carolina.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the perception that this is a program and a group of players that once they start finally getting hyped a little bit and people kind of start believing them, they're like, they don't know what to do with that necessarily. And can that happen? Sure. Is it as prevalent as it can be made out to be? Probably not. Again, they handled the business against A&M. They're well aware of the stakes this weekend against. I look at Vanderbilt and South Carolina as two teams kind of looking in the mirror at each other. They are so similar in a lot of ways in what the perception of them is and what they've proven so far this year and what they still have to play for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, and there were two teams that a lot of people didn't expect to be in this position. Remember, South Carolina was picked pretty low in those preseason SEC predictions. As Vandy, look, they might as well print out the voting paper with Vandy at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Just print it out with Vandy last and be done with it. So these two teams, much better than many folks thought. And I get it. You take away that Spurrier era. To some people, they feel like it was just yesterday, and some people feel like it was 100 years ago, right? Just depends on your perception. And you talk to people here, and they'll tell you that, hey, every time we get our hopes up, what happens to us?
Which there's a lot of people that are on pins and needles this week. Like, win against a top 10 team, going to Vanderbilt. Seen this story before.
Watch this movie. Oh, yeah. What is it? The chicken curse and all these other things.
I forgot about the chicken curse.
Yeah, so I mean, we understand because we've been well schooled by folks who have gone through it why they feel the way they do. We get it, but a lot of times it takes just a crew of players who don't care about any of it. I mean, 2 years ago, this team won 8 games. That's almost totally forgotten now by some people. Like it never happened.
Well, and I think you have the opportunity to create a narrative of what this program is under Beamer. Because, again, you had that 8-win season that nobody saw coming. Then you did 5-7. It's like, okay, what happens this year? Was that the norm of 5-7, or is that just a anomaly and you're back to being an 8 to 9-ish win team?
Right. Which one's the anomaly and which one's the real direction? All right. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Maybe you just woke up. We'll tell you about some of the things that have been happening since you were sleeping. Right here on the halftime show. We go till 3 on the game. The Men's Clinic of South Carolina, we talk about them all the time here, Dr. Dan and his staff. They are here to help you. You're a guy, you're getting older, and you just feel off. And it's bugging you because you don't know why you don't sleep like you used to, why you're weaker at the gym, why you don't have any life drive, why you're forgetting where you leave your keys all the time. But you're not talking about it because we're dudes. We don't talk, we're men, we're manly. But you're concerned. And then you start going, and God forbid you start going on the internet and start Googling all this, and you really drive yourself nuts. It's very simple. 803-875-MENS. Make the call, set up a free confidential consultation at the Men's Clinic. It could be just low testosterone. They'll talk to you. If they think it's low T, they'll do lab work. If it comes back low testosterone, they'll put you on a program to get you feeling like you again. Quit sweating. Call the Men's Clinic, 803-875-MENS. It could just be low T. What we're talking about is maybe the stuff that's been going on while you're asleep in the sports world. Weird night of sports last night, Tyler. Because obviously it was election night, there's not a lot of heavy stuff on the sports calendar besides the college football playoff rankings coming out.
Yeah.
7 p.m.
7.
Had some action going on last night, though.
A little bit.
Which was fun. And obviously you had NBA, NHL, things of that nature. This will give us a second, though, to get caught up on a couple of stories we haven't really hit yet that are resetting. Number one, and this is kind of funny, Joel Embiid, who hasn't played all year for the Sixers, which has really caused a lot of controversy in Philly because Embiid gets paid tons of money and he's one of the best players in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Embiid has not played. He's trying to get himself back in shape. He's had a wonky knee. And so Embiid has not played in a game all year. Now, here's the ironic part. He was suspended for 3 games without pay. Hadn't played all year. Oh, my God. The guy that hadn't played all year is now suspended for 3 games. And without pay? Really? He spends more money than that on shoes.
Right.
So Joel Embiid has been suspended 3 games without pay for shoving Philadelphia Inquirer columnist Marcus Hayes. Now, I'm going to say this. I am a guy, on a very low level of the media food chain, we're part of the media. Kind of, sort of. And I think that a lot of times owners, GMs, coaches, players, they dump on the media because they can.
Of course.
Because fans will always, if you're a high level anything and you're going up against the media, fans typically will side with the high level whoever over the media. But in this case, Marcus Hayes wrote in a column about Embiid. He was basically talking about Embiid not playing. And it was basically paraphrasing. Embiid didn't like a column written by Hayes that mentioned Embiid's son and late brother while he was questioning Embiid's professionalism and effort to stay in shape. See, I think that's where you cross a line. And I read it, and it was unnecessary. What the columnist wrote, he didn't have to write to prove his point. Mm-hmm. That felt almost like clickbait. And I'm going to say something. This guy, the columnist, is better than this. The guy's good.
Right.
And the Inquirer is a well-respected newspaper. And I get the Northeast. Sports in the Northeast, it's a lot more negative and nasty than it is in pretty much almost everywhere else in the country. A lot more screaming and arguing and a lot more criticism. And it's more intense.
Yeah.
I get it. But you don't go personal to prove a point about professional. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And again, Hayes is a good columnist, but that was going too far. Now, should Embiid have shoved him? No. You can't put hands upon others.
Yeah, especially when you are a far bigger physical specimen than this columnist, because again, that's not a fair fight.
No. If you have a problem with it, you have every right to. You should walk up to Marcus Hayes. Hey, dude, can I steal you for a minute?
Yeah. Now, if somebody's physically attacking you, that's
a different ballgame.
But again, taking issue, and rightfully so, with what a columnist wrote, that should not get to a physical level, especially in the locker room.
Now, most media guys aren't going to attack a 6'11", 270 or 60-pound guy.
Right.
So you go to Marcus Hayes. Hey, Marcus, can you and I talk for a minute? And you go off to the side. You find a place. And you say, man, I didn't appreciate that. Man, you can say what you want about me, but leave my family out of your mouth.
Right.
And that's all you got to do and handle it. You just don't handle it the way Joel Embiid did. You don't put hands upon the media guy. You don't put hands upon anybody at this point. Because really, you're the one that loses, Embiid.
Right.
You get fined even though you can afford it. You get suspended even though you're not playing. And so you don't win. You're never going to win that battle. But if you want to express your opinion, you didn't appreciate a piece. Okay, you have every right to express that opinion. A columnist he's an opinion guy. You don't like his opinion? Pull him aside and talk to him. But you're not going to win that battle.
Right.
And I get bringing up your, late brother? Come on, man. Really? But just handle it different. You have every right to not like it. But, just don't be shoving him because all of a sudden the focus is you shoving him, not what you're upset about.
Right.
It's sort of like this Jason Kelce thing that just happened. Jason Kelce's walking through the the tailgate lot at State College. Wouldn't he carry him beer or something?
Yeah, something like that.
And you get some drunk slob screaming and saying bad stuff about his brother, and his brother's a bleep because he dates Taylor Swift. And I always think about where I grew up. Follow somebody around and start talking bad about their family.
Yeah, see what happens.
Yeah. Put it this way. I got 3 letters for you. ICU.
I was going to say the phone wouldn't have been the only thing broken.
Oh, yeah. You're lucky that, yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is, how drunk are you when you go after that large of a human being who, by the way, if you've ever watched, did you ever see Jason Kelsey's speech after the Eagles won the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Jason Kelsey's got an insanity button. So do you want to go up to a very large individual with an insanity button and start talking junk about his family?
Right.
And I'm going to try to say this as nice as I can. There's a part of me that wishes Kelsey would have picked him up and slammed him into a body cast. Because, you get these imbeciles that do this stuff now thinking, well, that guy's not going to touch me because, he's famous. And again, like we said about Embiid, you're the one that loses. And that's the sad part sometimes.
Exactly.
But there is a part of me that wishes Kelsey would have picked that cat up. Did you see Kelsey try to kick the field goal?
With
McAfee?
In the Timbs.
I wish he would have put that dude on a tee and tried to kick him through the uprights. I don't care how much, you knock down some liquid courage and you're going to carry your phone and get the video and yeah. Anyway, and the only reason Kelsey apologized because I guarantee you Disney made him.
Yeah, because he's on Monday Night Football now and had to come out with the apology on Monday, but nobody is blaming him. And again, that wasn't he did not physically hurt the guy. He took his phone and chucked it. And now there's the debate about is it pressing charges or damage to property, whatever, which in and of itself is its own thing. But, I think that was a warranted response to what happened.
Here's what I wish the apology Jason Kelsey would have done, and he couldn't. I just want to sit here for a minute on Monday Night Football, and I want to apologize. I didn't stick that phone up that guy's butt. I want to apologize.
Give McGregor apologize for absolutely nothing.
Yes. I want to apologize the fact that I didn't dismember him right there in the parking lot.
Right.
That's the apology I wanted to hear. But again, that's just, again, like with Hayes, the columnist, if you're doing that for the clickbait and to be about you and to get you out there can be consequences to this. Look, when you had Tavon Diggs of the Dallas Cowboys go after a columnist for basically saying that he wasn't playing hard, that's about the game and the sport, and that's another thing altogether.
Right.
But when you make it personal, now you're opening a door you shouldn't be opening. Because there was no reason for that in that column.
Yeah, no, if the reporter guy, for the Trayvon Diggs thinks that he's not hustling because his mom didn't love him as a child, okay, now you're crossing the line.
Right, now you got something.
He was simply commenting on what we all saw in that game, and Trayvon Diggs' response was certainly not the best optics.
I mean, athletes today are too thin-skinned. They really are. Because of social media.
Well, and the optics of the Diggs thing is like, you didn't even take off your shoulder pads and you're checking Twitter.
Right,
like, what are you doing? You guys just lost.
Right.
And your first instinct is check social media.
So that tells you what's wrong with the culture in that locker room right there and the lack of leadership and accountability. You made it about a guy saying something about you instead of the fact that you just got embarrassed for 3 hours. So that tells you right now what's wrong with the Cowboys. Well, who sets that culture? The owner that does that every day, by the way. So they're too thin-skinned to start with. But when you make it personal about family, that's a different ballgame. So Joel Embiid suspended for 3 games. Firehouse Sub text the hour 803-404-6100 is next. We're hanging out here on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head on the game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. Oh, time to get our Firehouse Sub Text of the Hour and check our new poll question of the day on Twitter, X, Twitter, whatever it is. Alrighty. Go for a Firehouse Sub Text of the Hour first, then we'll get the old Twitter poll out.
Nameless texter says, feel like the committee didn't want too much SEC bias, which is when it came to rankings. So that's why Carolina and Vandy got the short end of the stick in the rankings. They both deserve to be in.
Could be. And you know what that texter's saying? Wow, human beings making not objective opinions or thoughts or conclusions. A texter could be right. Look, you don't know what's going through these people's noggin.
You don't. And again, was Carolina ever going to run the table and make the playoff? Probably not. Again, it's more of the principle of having a number next to your name, just to kind of say, hey, we're one of the best 25 teams in the eyes of the people that decide to get to play for the national championship. It's nice. And again, I think Carolina's got the opportunity to get that should they continue to win, and maybe even this weekend beat Vanderbilt. But I just if they would have included no 3-loss teams, it's like, okay, well, 3 losses is too many for this point in the rankings. That's fine. But when you look at the team that did include in Louisville, and you directly compare everything for South Carolina to them, you say, well, technically Carolina's beat them in every major criteria point here.
And so is Vandy.
For the most part, yeah.
I mean, Vandy's got a win over Alabama. Does Louisville have a win anywhere near close to that win over that Vandy has over Bama?
No, their win is against the team they're ranked right in front of, that being Clemson.
Right. So, yeah, it's texter. You could have we don't know. We know this. Human beings do it, and they're not objective. That's the way this works. And it could be we can't put too many SEC teams in there because, well, that won't look good. Why did Southern Cal and UCLA and UW and Oregon and all those teams run away from the Pac-12? Because their commissioner hooked up with Kevin Warren and the ACC commissioner to show the SEC what's up, because the SEC added Oklahoma and Texas. Again, an emotional response. And typically when you run with your emotions, what happens to you?
Yeah.
When you think with your heart, not with your head, a lot of times it leads you down a really bad road. And now we have a Pac-2.
For the time being.
Well, until it becomes a Group of 5 league.
It becomes a 6-pack.
Exactly. All right, here's our Twitter X poll. Poll question of the day, a question we never thought we would ask. Does this Vanderbilt football team make you worry about the game on Saturday? We just want a little check, because it's Vanderbilt. We talked about bias earlier, right? Everybody sees Vandy, they go W. This year, not so much. 85% so far? Yeah, they're a good team. I'm concerned. 15%, nah, it's just Vandy. And we'll get to some comments next hour on it. We have a few comments on there. So, folks are paying attention. Good. Just want to check, make sure. Good. So, that's on our little Twitter X poll that we just started about an hour ago or whatever here on the game. All right, we'll have football coming to the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Obviously, we're going to jump right back into Shane Beamer from yesterday's presser. We're going to hear Shane talk about the improvement with the perimeter blocking. Because, look, I said this. We all sit here and go over these Pro Football Focus grades. They have somebody who grades these games. And I thought they kind of gave South Carolina's offensive line a little bit of low run grade. I get the pass grades weren't good because, let's face it, Lenore Sellers would take a snap and start running for his life.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought South Carolina's run blocking was better than PFF graded it, especially out on the perimeter. I thought the perimeter blocking much better. Remember week 1? There was no perimeter blocking.
No.
It's like, dude, I'm a wide receiver. Block who? The perimeter blocking was, I thought, much better than they graded out in PFF. So Shane will talk about the perimeter blocking. How about Torricelli Simpkins with the award? Or the blocker of the week thing.
Good to see.
I thought it was interesting, especially when look at his grade. So again, we're not always going to agree with Pro Football Focus. We're not. And sometimes Pro Football Focus, they're right and we're wrong. But for the run blocking grades, I thought they were a little low this past Saturday. And don't get me wrong, Rocket Sanders, most of his yards are after contact. Lenore Sellers broke 12 tackles. We get it. Those two guys did superhuman stuff to accumulate the yardage that they accumulated. This wasn't the offensive line just slobber knocker in Texas A&M backwards 5 and 10 yards. We get it. The numbers don't reflect the play of the offensive line to a point, but I thought the run blocking was a little bit better than they were given credit for. So we'll hear about that also. We're going to hear from Debo. Debo Williams talking to the media yesterday, and Clark Lee, the Vanderbilt head coach, and we've got to take a listen to Ward Manuel, the head of the chair for the College Football Playoff Committee. All that's coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. Football here on the Halftime Show on the Game, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Tomorrow, it'll be myself, Tyler Head, and some dude named Elijah Campbell bugging us, calling us. I guess we'll take his call. He'll be over at Dillon Columbia Supply Company, 320 Orchard Drive in West Columbia. They're having their fall open house. Elijah will be there telling you about all the cool stuff going on. And so I guess we'll just put up with him from noon to 2.
We're supposed to.
Yeah, well, we have to. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we have to help our advertisers. Don't want to talk to him. We help our advertisers.
That's right.
So that's tomorrow, noon to 2. Elijah will be at Dillon Columbia Supply Company, 320 Orchard Drive in West Columbia. And, of course, we have Carolina Calls also Thursday night with Shane and Todd Ellis. That's 6 p.m. right here on the Game in Columbia, and also our affiliate in Myrtle Beach as well on Thursday. And, of course, Thursday Night Football. We're packed up on Thursday. Bengals and Ravens in Baltimore, 7:30 pregame on, you can hear it here on the Game in Columbia. I also believe in Florence as well. All right. Shane Beamer, like we said, talked to the media yesterday, and you heard it right here on the Game in Columbia. And here, Shane, let's get to cut 3, Tyler. Shane discussing the improvement in perimeter blocking from that first Old Dominion game where the perimeter blocking left a ton to be desired.
Yeah, you should have been in the team meeting this morning because that was one of the focal points in the team meeting this morning. So ask me that question again next Tuesday, and hopefully we did that in Nashville because it's going to be a challenge this week in all seriousness. You watch when I talk about those defensive backs with size, that's a challenge for our receivers because we're not very big at the receiver position, and they've got a nickel that's 6'2", 220 pounds out there in space that our receivers are going to have to be able to block. And they've got safeties that are 6'4", 200 pounds. So when you talk about perimeter blocking, it's going to be a big challenge this week. Same thing for our defense as well because of the quarterback and the things that he's able to do with the ball in his hands on some of that zone read stuff, option that he pulls it and he's out there in space. We showed the team, the whole team this morning, some clips of, Vandy's receivers and tight ends physically getting after some other SEC defensive backs on the perimeter that the quarterback or running back might be. So it'll be a big challenge this week. As far as the buy-in, we just talk about it all the time. I mean, it's a period that we do in practice every Tuesday where it's the starting defensive backs and linebackers versus the starting tight ends and receivers and running backs. And we just do the linemen aren't there. It's just perimeter, just rapid fire, right side, left side, right side, left side. Y'all been out there and seen us do that in August. And we do that every Tuesday and make a big point about it and coach off of it. And that's where so many of those explosives come from. A lot of the success that we were able to have in the run game the other night was because of perimeter blocking, and whether it's Nick Harbor coming down and blocking a defensive end or cracking a linebacker or somebody, I think it was Gage on one of Rocket's runs over there on A&M sideline where Gage comes in and cracks the safety. It's a point of emphasis and something that we talk about all the time, and they're fortunate that they have a receivers coach that was a tough dude as a football player as well and did that himself when he was playing in the NFL, and something that we pride ourselves on around here for sure.
To Ricky Wright, the senior safety for Vandy, 6'4", 220. It's a large safety, man.
That's about 20-ish pounds away from being your ideal linebacker?
Yes. It's a large safety. So it's very interesting that Shane brought that up. And, yeah, that is a thing. When you're Gage Larvidan, you're Jared Brown, and you're cracking DBs, you run up to crack a 6'4", 220-pound safety.
Yeah, that's a challenge. But, again, the strength of this run game for Sellers and for Rocket is getting outside the tackles, getting into open space, which is where you're going to have to rely on those holes being opened up by your tight ends, by your receivers. And, again, we saw a lot of good on that from Saturday night, and you hope that was just the beginning of what's going to continue on this final month of the season.
So, again, we will be carrying the South Carolina Vanderbilt game, starting with Gamecocks game day. 11 o'clock at O'Hara's, the bakery, right next to O'Hara's Public House.
Come by, have a bagel, have some coffee, hang out.
Bagels are so good, man.
They are really good.
Didn't they kidnap a guy from New York, a bagel-making dude from New York, and brought him to that bakery?
We can't prove that.
There's no proof of that?
Allegedly.
All I know is those are some fine. But we had, remember that week we had our first week at O'Hara's, they brought the bagels over.
Depending on the kick time of the game, because, of course, we do our show 5 hours beforehand. When you're there at 10:30, they're still trying to set everything up. So they don't exactly have lunch food ready. So, here's some bagels.
Yeah.
We gladly took those.
Oh, yes, we did. And we ate them, and we said, wow, we don't know if we like those or not. Give us 12 more. So really good stuff at the bakery there at O'Hara's. We'll be doing Gamecocks game day from there. Tyler Head, Elijah Campbell will be doing the show. And then we will have our viewing party from O'Hara's as well with Tyler Head and a cast of thousands.
Got to actually have a pretty good record for viewing parties this year.
We're doing okay, man. We're doing all right. I think the Bama game was really good, even though it lost it at the end. Beat Kentucky, beat A&M, beat Oklahoma. No, I mean, beat Oklahoma, beat Kentucky, lost to Alabama.
2-1 with a very, and again, we rolled the roller coaster with everybody in there for that into that Alabama game.
That Bama game. I look, I've been doing this for about 100 years. I don't think I've ever been at a viewing party in all my sports talk life where the emotion was flying back and forth so quick. It was insane. That game was nuts. It was legitimately nuts. Oh, recover the onside kick. Oh, make a big play. Oh, God, I can't believe that. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Oh, it was nuts.
For a game that everybody coming into it said, I just hope we're competitive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the great idea until you have a chance to actually win it.
Yeah, it's like,
Once
crap.
you have a chance to actually win
in this thing.
Exactly. So that will be our coverage gets underway at 11 o'clock. The network pregame will kick, it's 3 hours, 1 o'clock, 4:15. They boot the football in Nashville, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. Again, come hang out with us for a viewing party at O'Hara's Public House, Main Street in Lexington. One quick news note from South Carolina women's basketball. Ashlyn Watkins, with the dismissal of the legal charges, South Carolina junior forward Ashlyn Watkins has returned to the team to begin team activities, beginning with practice today.
That's right.
Just want to get that piece of information out there in case you did not hear that.
That was something I know a lot of people have been asking for leading up season. Why is Don not talking about it and all this kind of stuff? It's a legal proceeding. There's nothing they really could have done until we got to this point. So, again, she's able to rejoin the team, and we'll see when she's finally able to get back on the court.
Right. And obviously she's important, especially a defensive anchor in the paint.
Yep.
Very athletic and excellent defensively. All right, back to Shane Beamer from yesterday at the presser. Shane, talking about, look, there's been a big discussion about Lenora Sellers and ball security. It's been a thing, let's just be honest. And it was a thing in the A&M game once. Sellers fumbled, was being hit again, and fumbled. A&M recovered it, up by 3 on that final South Carolina drive of the half. Could have been a disaster because A&M got the ball and would have got the ball in real good field position with a chance to tack on to their 2017 lead. Instead, the Aggies had defensive holding. By the way, it was legit defensive holding. I believe it was B.J. Mays, their corner.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good call. He was grabbing, and why he was grabbing him, I got no idea. When you watch that replay, you're like, why are you doing that? Harbor, I believe, was coming out of a break and, to run the route and go to the sideline, and may just reach out and grab his jersey right by the shoulder pad. What are you doing? Again, if you're a Gamecock fan, thank God. But it was a bad penalty. And it cost A&M huge.
Right.
Because Carolina got the ball back, went downfield, kicked a field goal, tied the game at 20. That's the only time we had a ball security issue on Saturday with Lenora Sellers. But here's Shane talking about balancing the, hey, don't fumble, don't turn the ball over, don't put the ball in harm's way, and not wanting to make a guy all of a sudden become less aggressive because he's scared to turn the ball over. Here's our coach.
Yeah, Dal's right, and what you're saying is right. You don't want to turn them into a robot where you're scared to make mistakes. I mean, there was a play that I showed last week of Arkansas. Arkansas versus A&M, and it was Arkansas's quarterback in the game earlier this year where he got out of the pocket, he rolled to the right. It was during a 2-minute drill, and he was trying to make a play late in the game, but he made a throw where he kind of threw it back across his body, back inside, and it was intercepted by Texas A&M. And I made the point in the team meeting that we can't make decisions like this. We got to play winning football. But then I also got to thinking about it. Like, I don't want to paralyze him from that standpoint either. So I pulled Lenoris aside individually later, and I told him, look, I showed that clip, and the point that I was making is we can't throw the ball back across our body inside, but I want you to go out there Saturday night and cut it loose and have fun and be the playmaker that you are. And you saw that. You don't want to coach that out of him. But there's also, in my mind, the no matter what you're doing and you're trying to make plays, you can play with proper ball security in the pocket and know that Texas A&M, I've talked to you guys about those 4D linemen and how good they are, and they do a great job of swatting at balls, and Lenoris coaching him up to carry the ball the right way. And there's certainly some times where he was carrying the ball the other night, not great, and I'm sure Vanderbilt's looking at it and saying, hey, if he's going to carry the ball loose like this, we need to get that ball out. So you're always emphasizing, not just with Lenoris, but all of our ball carriers, defensive guys included, how we want to carry the ball. But then also Lenoris, just with more experience, I think he gets better with this, just understanding what's going on around him in the pocket, making sure that he's got the ball where we want it to be in the pocket, where we don't have those costly fumbles like that as well. I mean, some of them are going to happen. I'm bang play and somebody puts his helmet right on the ball. Sometimes it's going to pop out, but we don't want to have the ones that are more self-inflicted than the other team doing a great job getting it out.
So there is this balance, right, of, okay, you can't put the ball in harm's way. You got to get smarter. You got to understand how to live for the next play. Don't try to do too much, yada, 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 yada. Make smart decisions. But don't coach out the aggressiveness of a player. Because we saw how when Lenoris Sellers just run around making plays, if Sellers isn't doing that last Saturday, you don't win. Yeah,
no, you have to let him be a little bit loose and free, but at the same time, also be careful with the ball in his hands because, again, he's been prone to those turnovers. And you're going up against an A&M defense this year that isn't phenomenal at taking the ball away. They're pretty much middle of the pack when it comes to total takeaways. But I think back to their two biggest games this year against Texas and Alabama, takeaways were a big key part of that game. They had the pick six against Alabama that put them up by double digits. They stopped them from going down and potentially taking the lead late in that game when they were only leading by 5 by forcing a fumble that they ended up turning into a touchdown themselves. And they got a big pick six against Quinn Ewers the other week, taking on Texas. Like, this is a defense that when they do take the ball away, they usually make pay for it. So you got to be very, very careful about not putting the ball back in either just the defense's hands for a scoop and score or a Diego Pavia with the short field.
Yeah, I mean, A&M obviously leading the conference in turnover margin, so they're turnover hunting like nobody's business. And that's why last week was so important. You just could not put the ball in harm's way against a team. Well, you saw it. We speak of B.J. Mays, who had a really weird night. He had some really bad moments, but had the good moment where he did the peanut punch on Rocket Sanders to force the fumble, where Sanders had a big play, an explosive play, a first down. Then Mays comes in and does the punch and knocks it out, and A&M recovers the fumble.
Right.
And that's the world of now when you have the ball on offense. There are guys who don't care about tackling you anymore, Tyler. They just want to knock the ball out of your hand. How many times do we see 4 guys hold a dude up while one guy comes in and tries to punch the ball out? And the guy's like going down the field.
Yep.
And nobody cares because they're trying to rip the ball out of his hand because the turnover is gold. I will get back in here and hear from Debo Williams. Debo talking about Vandy, his chemistry with Demetrius Knight. We're not even at our best yet. Got some Debo Williams sound coming back as the players did also speak yesterday. It's a halftime show. Football, and more football in the 1 o'clock hour. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Terry Ford, Tyler Head here on The Game. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on the game. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Appreciate you listening. If you're in Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach on the 107.5 The Game app, watching our YouTube channel, Game TV, powered by Integrated Media and sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass. All righty. Players also spoke yesterday. Debo Williams at the mic. First of all, Debo talking about coming off of that excellent second half where South Carolina threw a donut at Texas A&M. Debo discusses where the defense is at. Are they near their best? Here's Debo.
Yeah, we just heating up. We haven't played a perfect game yet. I've been saying donuts all year. We have yet to give a donut. So as a defense, I can speak for the defense. We not even at our best. So we got to continue to get better every single day.
I mean, technically, half a donut. So, when they have free donuts and that one person gets a little knife out and cuts them in half,
Yeah.
you get half of one.
I mean, we've always kind of, gone into the whole donut box and you saw a half one that's been cut.
Here's the thing.
They did a half a donut.
If you're eating a donut, eat the whole thing. Come on. Half, really?
I've always wondered the people that cut it in half and leave it. I get you want
Do you
a
feel
donut.
better about yourself? Like the thing, okay, it's what, 300 calories a donut? Okay, congratulations, $1.50 instead. Just eat the whole thing. Yeah, you might have to spend 20 extra minutes at the gym, but live a little.
Here's my thing. You and I can do this and say this because combined, you and I don't weigh as much as Tonka Hemingway.
Sure.
You and I have been blessed with pretty good metabolisms. Yours is ridiculously freakish. Mine is still pretty good. So we can sit and go, knock down a donut. Go ahead.
I think there's also it's less appealing knowing that somebody else has already touched it.
Well, you wonder what they've done. Did they put their hand and break it? Did they cut it? Did they take a few bites and put it back down? You're always wondering how exactly this was handled,
If
right?
you see a very clean cut and it's not been squished at all, it's okay, maybe the knife did the job. But then you see the fingerprints where they've had to kind of pinch half the donut. Funny enough, the path they didn't end up taking to end up cutting it in half. And you see that left over in the box.
And it kind of looks like a bite mark.
Yeah, it's
Isn't it?
How did they get to the half on this?
Here's the other funny part of this. You and I are talking about this. When I was younger, I wouldn't have cared. I'm eating the donut. I don't care if you bit it.
Sure.
I don't care if you're standing there and someone who worked with me took 4 bites and said, dude, I don't want the rest. You want it? Absolutely. Somehow getting older, you start getting weird about that stuff where that didn't bother you ever before.
Well, when you're younger, you're invincible.
Sure you are.
Germs don't get you.
Yeah, you don't
then you
care
get
about
older and
germs.
suddenly you have allergies and can't have a cough that won't go away. Yeah, a little more germ conscious.
And all of a sudden you see that one weird story of somebody who caught some awful bacteria from something, just plain basic every day. And you're like, oh my God, I could die. If I ate that donut and the wrong person touched it, I could get some kind of flesh-eating bacteria and die.
I think we all turn into hypochondriacs, right?
Absolutely. Germaphobes.
Well, that's definitely going to happen to me.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be me. All right, so Debo also talked about, look, Demetrius Knight does not get talked enough about how good he has been. And it's been slowly building with Knight. Beginning of the year against Old Dominion, he made a play when that first possession ODU had. You saw the athleticism, you saw the speed, but he wasn't consistently wreaking havoc, right? As this season has gone on, his havoc ratio has really gone up. He's one of the best pass rushers in his position in America. He's really good in coverage. His knock early in the year was playing the run. Occasionally he'd have a missed tackle here and there. But last month, Demetrius Knight's game has just kicked into another gear.
Well, he was everywhere on Saturday. Double-digit tackles, stopped that first 4th down that A&M tried to convert. I mean, dude plays with his hair on fire.
The Oklahoma game, not only did he play with his hair on fire, but remember, he snuffed out the fake punt.
Yep.
They didn't block him. He ran right by everybody and okey-doked the tight end on that fake punt. So Demetrius Knight's been playing really well. And here's Debo talking about his chemistry with Knight. Cut 17, Tyler.
Man, just growing. We both want to be great, and so that connection just starts from there. When somebody else wants to do what you're trying to do as well, it's like, all right, it's a brotherhood, man. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, they've played very – look, that linebacker crew, and we talked about it coming into the year. we were hoping this upgrade in speed and athleticism would lead to an uptick in playmaking. Remember, our biggest thing about, and we always say this about tackles, the tackle stat is very misleading.
It's where you make them.
Where you make them on the field. How close to the line of scrimmage are you making tackles?
If you're tackling everyone 6 yards down the field, I'm glad you're stopping them, but
it's not very effective in the big picture.
no, it is not.
This crew of linebackers is making more plays and affecting the game closer to the line of scrimmage. You know, and Bam Martin Scott's done it as well. He started in November last year. Now, is he doing damage like Demetrius Knight consistently? No, but Bam Martin Scott has made plays. Debo, we talk about Debo all the time. Debo has a switch. And the minute that switch gets kicked, when the football is teed, that switch doesn't turn off till the game is over. And Debo's flying everywhere. Sometimes it ends up really well. Sometimes it's like, Debo, go to the right gap, Chief.
Well, and you look at what happened later in the game when A&M went for another fourth down, and Debo, with that hair on fire, shot that gap perfectly and was able to, I think that he got it to the running back, and he tackled him in the backfield. But regardless, he just came in like a missile. And they played it perfectly.
But that's the thing. When he comes in there like a missile, and when he guesses right, he blows stuff up. But here's the good news: if he's guessing wrong, he's got some guys also in that linebacking crew with speed and athleticism that might be able to make a play if Debo guesses wrong, or Debo with his hair on fire goes where maybe he shouldn't have. They're so much better this year, and you're not asking as much of Debo this year. And that's another thing too. Last year, he was really asked not only to do his job, but to cover other jobs.
Yeah, he was in 5 places at once, never left the field. This year, he is able to catch his breath on occasion. Again, you got a very deep room there. And again, you definitely upgraded with what you brought in with Demetrius Knight compared to what you lost last year.
Yeah, and the other thing with Debo Williams, he's such a leader. I mean, dude is no joke. And like I said, we talked about SEC Media Days. My man was locked in. And Elijah and I were like, man, I want to go hit somebody. How about you? Because, I mean, Debo's ready to play.
Right.
Debo should have showed up at SEC Media Days wearing pads, full uni, and just gone Terry Tate office linebacker on folks.
Just sacked every quarterback that was there.
Knocking the snot out of people.
Milroe talking the SEC Network. Go hit him.
Hey, Greg McElroy play quarterback. Destroys him on the set. And here's Debo, the last bit, and this is on Vanderbilt. Debo talking about the Commodores.
Yeah, I like what they're doing, man. Happy for them. They've been having a great season, so they like to run that rock, and they're able to make plays off of that, They have great players, and they play hard.
Yeah. I like, it's like, I'm happy for them. Not this week. I'll be happy for them the rest of the year.
Well, that's kind of the funny thing of, like, where Vanderbilt's been for so long. They've been the punching bag of the SEC to where, like, every fan base to a degree is like, good for Vanderbilt. At some point this year, whether it be when they beat Alabama, when they got to bowl eligibility last week, like, we've all felt good about Vanderbilt and happy for them at some point this year. Obviously, you change the expectation this week. Okay, they're playing Carolina, don't want them to win, but like, nobody really has a problem saying good for Vandy outside of, I guess, Tennessee.
Exactly. And the other thing is, everybody looks at it this way. I'm rooting for Vandy, except when they play my team.
Exactly. And a lot of people are like, glad we don't play them this year.
Exactly.
Which something you never thought you'd say about Vanderbilt.
Ever.
Really dodged that Nashville bullet this year.
Halftime show, football to 1 o'clock hour. Speaking of Vandy, we'll hear from Clark Lee coming up next, the Vanderbilt head coach, his thoughts about his team and facing the Gamecocks. That's next here on the Halftime show. Also, I don't want to forget this, Tyler, Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Contest. We're up to $900.
That's where we broke it last year.
Here we go.
And hey, you're not going to be at the game.
No.
So maybe there's some magic there.
Yeah, so get in on it. Go to 1075thegame.com, look for the Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Contest, click on it, fill out the little form, pop submit, and you're in. If South Carolina scores a special teams touchdown this Saturday, we will have a drawing Monday morning on the early game at 7:30. You got to get your name in there. If you're not in there yet, go to 1075thegame.com and register. It's Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Contest. Some Clark Lee, the Vanderbilt head coach. We'll hear from Clark next on the Halftime show. Terry Ford and Tyler Head here on The Game. What we're talking about is what we're always talking about in the 1 o'clock hour on the halftime show. We talk lots of football. Football, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. All right, Vanderbilt this year. It is interesting. We talk about Vandy. Obviously, the Bama upset goes front and center. Beat Kentucky, but everybody's beating Kentucky. Beat Auburn, everybody's beating Auburn. Had a very close 3-point loss to Texas. 3-point loss to Missouri.
Should have beat Missouri.
Oh, absolutely. Kicker. And then had a head-scratching road loss to Georgia State, where they gave up 36 points. Every game they've lost, they've given up at least 27. But, let's see, they got 3 losses by a combined total of what? 10 points? 8 points.
Yes.
I think it is.
Yes.
So, yes, this team did lose to Georgia State. It was close. It was on the road. And they lost at Missouri, and they lost at home to Texas. Every game this year, the losses have been tight.
Well, that loss to Georgia State, because I think we all looked to that win against Virginia Tech in week 1, where, VT was thought to be a dark horse ACC playoff contender, and said, hey, man, look at good for Vanderbilt. Look at them pulling off a big win against a Power 4 opponent. Then they lost to Georgia State and said, all right, there's Vandy being Vandy again. And then lo and behold, they beat Alabama a couple weeks later. And it wasn't just beating Alabama, because, look, we've seen fluke victories and last-second field goals and all these kind of crazy things that happen. They controlled that game. They never trailed in that game. They outpaced Alabama. Alabama couldn't get them off the field. They're one of the best teams when it comes to converting third downs, and they were electric that day. Diego Pavia had his best day of the entire season. He's only about a 62% completion percentage on average. He had 80% that day. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, had another about 50 yards on the ground. He was everywhere. Like, they played almost a perfect game offensively in that contest. And again, Alabama's offense, as good as they were, put up points as you would expect them to do, but their defense did enough with those takeaways, with getting a pick six, with getting that fumble late in the game when Alabama was driving to win. So it's a dangerous group.
Yeah, and they're very efficient. When they're cooking on offense, they're not a lot of explosive plays or anything like that. The Alabama game was interesting. Alabama come on the field and hit them with an explosive play for a touchdown. Then Vanderbilt take the ball 17 plays.
Right.
And score a touchdown. Vanderbilt, when their offense is right, is facing a lot of 3rd and 2s and 3rd and 1s and things of that nature. 3rd and shorts where they convert and they just keep plodding down the field on you. And before you know it, it's a 16-play, 82-yard drive that just consumed 8 minutes of the clock and they scored a touchdown. That's what they want to do to you. Time of possession is a very useless stat unless you're finishing it up with a touchdown. And Vanderbilt has been finishing up long time-consuming drives, typically with scores, especially with touchdowns. And Pavia has been the trigger for that whole thing. So here's Clark Lee. Starts off by discussing the South Carolina defensive line. Cut 22, Tyler.
Well, you gotta find creative ways to make for space, because if you are inefficient on early downs, and this is a little bit what got us against Auburn, but when we get behind the chains, if you get this group to 3rd and 7+, you're going to have to deal with that edge pressure, and they're really good at being disruptive at the launch point. So finding space on early downs will be kind of A1 priority for us. To do that, obviously, you've got to, again, handle the edges and find the matchups you like in the run game to get some semblance of, forward movement. And, we need to be able to connect on some of the shots that I felt like we were close on against Auburn. We're looking for 1 or 2 more first downs within that game just to really control possession, and then, another touchdown to create separation. And I think it's going to be a very similar game this weekend, and that's if we can, protect the ball. If we don't protect the ball, then we expose ourselves to a team that is really good at capitalizing on turnovers and short fields, and that was on display for them against Texas A&M, which is a really good team that they beat at home. And their ability to create short fields for their offense and then create explosive plays offensively, was a formula that allowed them to create distance in that game. So obviously offensively, like I said, first and second down efficiency sets up third down and manageable. That's kind of our rhythm for maintaining possession. We maintain possession. We get a chance to get the ball up and over the top, and now we're playing to our formula. If we're off schedule early, it's going to become a defensive grinder like Saturday was, and we're going to rely on defense and special teams to hold the line until we're able to find those breakthroughs.
Might have been the longest 2 minutes of my life.
He doesn't have the most dynamic personality, I will say that much.
I won't lie to you. I started to glaze over there a little bit. All right. Basically, what he said, he goes, we can't get behind the chains. Vanderbilt gets behind the chains. Not only are they not playing to their strength, but now you unleash the beasts, the pass rush of South Carolina. And that's the last thing Vanderbilt wants to do. And Vanderbilt's defense, look, this is why you're impressed with Vandy. If you look at their season, their defense has been around average or really below average in a lot of metrics. And the offense, and I want to fix this to make sure I can see it. The glare is killing me on my own computer here. The offense, ready? 34 points, 55 points, 32 points, 27 points, 40, 20, that's against Kentucky, 24 against Ball State, 24 to loss to Texas. They were scoring over 20 pretty much in every game, except last Saturday against Auburn. Their formula didn't work. They got off a script. They got behind the chains, and they only scored 17. But guess what happened? The defense that has given up 27, I won't count Alcorn State, 36, 30, 35, 13 against Kentucky, 16 against Ball State, 27 against Texas. A defense has given up a lot of points. You know what they did? Hunkered down. Yeah. Basically, it was like this defense said, you've been carrying us most of the year. We got this today. Well, that's what winning teams do, Tyler.
Exactly. You can find a way to win in multiple facets. And, the Alabama game, obviously the offense played out of its mind and outpaced a very good, at the time, number one team in Alabama. But last week against Auburn, they got outgained by 100 yards, but they never let them have a single snap in the red zone, and Auburn missed 2 field goals. So defense and special teams came up big in a game where the offense wasn't exactly firing all cylinders, did enough to win, and the defense took care of the rest. So they can beat you in multiple ways. Now, again, it's probably going to lean more towards the defense more often than not, much like for South Carolina. But, we could see any kind of game this weekend, truly.
Mm-hmm. All right, college football playoff rankings came out last night, obviously. We're going to get some Ward Manual here in just a little bit. Let's get back to Clark Lee, though. One last thing, the losing streak to South Carolina. This is a short one, that's why I'm using it. Here's Clark Lee talking about having beaten the Gamecocks in a minute or two.
Sincerely, it doesn't occupy any part of my mind. I just don't hang on to those things. To me, it's like I'm really interested. What's personal to me is that we represent ourselves the best we can on Saturday. That's what I want to do. And, obviously in doing that, I would like for it to be in a winning effort and independent of who we're playing. Or, I didn't realize that it had been since 1955 that we beat Auburn, Alabama. But, those are things that are fun to find out after the game. But, they don't have any part of our, approach or process. So, again, we stay pretty insulated here with, focus on us, a focus on who we are, a focus on the things we need to strengthen in our performance. And that'll be our formula, from here on out.
What he wants to say is, and none of that matters. That's the past. Saturday matters. Those other whatever amount of games that we've lost to South Carolina doesn't matter because we're not that team.
For the first time in probably about 10 years, I think a lot of people give them a good shot in this game.
Yeah. It is funny because, again, this is what we do. We fill air. We come up with all these little stats. And, Haven't beaten Auburn and Alabama in the same year since 1746. Doesn't matter now. I always love the last time these two teams played. Here's what happened. Any of those guys on the team now?
I would say that was 12 years ago.
That's just what we do to fill air. And then, every now and then a media member will ask that question, and the coach looks at him like, we really don't care, bro. But they have to answer the question without saying we really don't care, bro. Firehouse Subtext the hour next, 803-404-6100. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors on the game.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tylerhead and Terry Ford on your Wednesday here on the game. Time to hit our Firehouse Sub text of the hour, 803-404-6100. Nameless texter says, does Coach Lee have a monotone voice or what? He must have another voice to use in the locker room to motivate players. I almost want to sleep watching his presser, and he doesn't like looking at the camera. You know, for coaches like him, like Napier, coaches that are a lot more low-key, you do kind of wonder, like, what is that like? Do they have the fire? Like, we heard the Elko speech last week before the LSU game. Like, that's a football coach. That's what you want to hear out of a head coach firing his players up for a big game. Like, do these guys have that same growl when they're talking to their guys? I'm sure they do, but it's kind of hard to picture.
Well, okay. Lee played at Vandy, right?
Right.
He's a Vandy guy. My take on guys like him and Napier is they do the media because they got to do the media. They don't like it. I guarantee you Clark Lee is much different when you take microphones and cameras and all that mess away. If he's like that, the players are napping.
Right.
I'm sorry. You know, we're talking about how talking to Debo at SEC Media Days, I want to go hit somebody. I listen to Clark Lee, I want to go curl up in a corner and take a nap.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is a guy who's doesn't like doing the media stuff, doesn't like doing the press conferences. He knows it's part of his job, so he's got to suck it up and go do it. Same thing with Napier. Hell, Belichick. This is the funniest thing. Bill Belichick. Look at him now. Watch him now. Now go watch a press conference with Belichick when he's a head coach.
Oh, yeah.
On to Cincinnati. On to Cincinnati.
With his jacket that he looked like he just got out of a dumpster.
Oh, yeah. He hasn't washed his hair in 6 months. Well, we're just trying to focus on the present. Yeah. We're just focusing on the opponent. I mean, that now look at Belichick on all these shows. He's on Pat McAfee. He's on with the Mannings. He's everywhere now. He's got podcasts. He's got video streaming. And all of a sudden you listen to him and you go, wow, the guy's halfway interesting.
Right.
I mean, I read something about this when he was still the head coach. He hangs out with John Bon Jovi.
I did hear something about that.
They say that you get Belichick away from the microphones and away from the podium and away from the media, he's actually a pretty entertaining dude to talk to. But the minute you put him back at a press conference, it's on to Cincinnati. Oh, we're on to Cincinnati.
He doesn't want to seem vulnerable as a coach, I guess.
They don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are so paranoid that anything they say can screw them over and lead to a loss or cause a problem or bring in stuff they don't need for distraction. They don't want to say anything. And that's what strikes me listening to Clark Lee. Is he don't want to say anything that's going to cause a distraction. It's going to be bulletin board material, and he doesn't really want to be up there in the first place. He just has to do it because it's his job.
Yep.
Like the texter said, he didn't even look at the camera. And by the way, texter, God love you to watch a Clark Lee press conference.
It was tough to sit through it yesterday, I'll say that.
Yeah, listening to it.
It is funny, though, because I think back to, because again, I always try and find clips of the coach the week of the opponent, kind of get their insight on what they're thinking about their team or facing South Carolina. And last year, when I pulled the clip for the Vandy game, again, Vandy had 2 wins at that point in time. Mm-hmm. They weren't going to a bowl game. The game was right around this time of the year. And I remember the weekly presser was him walking off of the practice field, and there was one reporter, I think Elijah's buddies with her, asking him questions, just standing on the side of the field. And now this is more of a formal setting with the microphone and the podium and a lot of reporters there. The night and day difference between where this team was a year ago and today is crazy.
Yeah. No one cared. No one cared. No one has cared for a while. Remember, a couple of years ago, they beat Florida and Kentucky in November, if my memory serves me. Everybody was getting all goo-goo and gaga about Vandy. And obviously it didn't last. And since James Franklin left, they've been pretty much a punching bag.
They would spring the occasional upset because, look, everybody has a Vandy loss every now and then, mm-hmm. and you pull your hair out and wonder where your program went wrong, and then you see Vandy loses their next 5 games, mm-hmm. and you beat them the next year. That's how this is supposed to work.
Right. So this year they're good. And look, one thing we haven't talked about on this show is not only they bring I think we did, but it's been a minute. Not only did they bring in Diego Pavia, they brought in his head coach, Jerry Kill, from New Mexico State. Kill had to leave because of, health issues.
And his OC, Tim Beck.
And the OC. So you're not only bringing the quarterback from a successful offense, you're bringing the offensive coordinator, and the head coach is now a consultant for you.
By the way, his favorite target, Eli Stowers, a tight end as well.
There you go.
So this is just New Mexico State East.
Exactly. So smart move by Clark Lee. Very smart move. All right, what's trending at 2? Coming up next from Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head on the game.
2 o'clock, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. It's all right, and Terry Ford along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. It is time for what is trending at 2. Again, big news for last night was the college football playoff top 25 being revealed for the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. And for the most part, the teams that we expected to be towards the top are there. South Carolina not included in this first edition, though I think when you look at this game against Vanderbilt this weekend, a chance for probably maybe or the winner of that game to get into next week's rankings. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and Miami, the top 4. And when you kind of look at the way the bracket would work out, and again, still got a lot more football to play. Teams within this are going to play each other, so this is going to change between now and the end of the regular season and the conference championships. But it is interesting to look how plugging these numbers in and what the playoff would look like because of that. We'd have Oregon as the number 1 overall seed, again, assuming that they win the Big Ten because they're the highest-ranked Big Ten team. Georgia at number 2 is the highest-ranked SEC team, getting a bye as well. Miami at 3 would get the ACC rep and the bye. And then BYU, who comes in at number 9, but by virtue of assuming they're the Big 12 champion, basically being the highest-ranked Big 12 team, jumps all the way up to 4 and gets a bye, which means Ohio State, who is number 2 right now, would have to play in the first round because they would not be the presumed conference champion, playing host to Boise State, the number 12 seed in the 5-12 matchup. Indiana would be going to Tennessee.
Hold real quick on the 5-12.
Yep.
Let's say that plays out like that and Ohio State's the 5. They play Boise State the 12. Boise State would be going to Columbus.
Right.
The winner would get BYU looked at as the weakest of the 4, correct?
That is correct.
So if you're Ohio State, that's a pretty good spot to sit in. Yeah, you are going to play a home game against Boise State, even though Boise State scared the bejesus out of Oregon, who you lost to in Eugene as well in a close game. The thought is Ohio State would be favored at home against Boise State.
Yeah.
You win that one, now you get BYU, who is looked at as the weakest of the 4 with the byes.
And that's the tricky part about this because there is a direct correlation between what game gets played and what quarterfinal game they advance to, where in other sports, you'll take the top seed and place them with the lowest remaining seed.
Yep.
So assuming the higher seeds ran the table instead of, I guess technically it would still match up that way where Oregon would get presumably Tennessee. But let's just say that Boise State beats Ohio State. Instead of them getting Oregon as the lowest seed in the playoff, they get BYU, the lower of the 4 seeds getting a bye, and then Oregon's playing either a 9 or an 8, Indiana and Tennessee. I don't know if that's something they'll revise in the future, but for this year at least, you have a direct correlation between your first-round game and what team you're going to face who's going to be on a bye instead of reseeding it based on lowest to highest.
I'm just saying, man, that's a nice little spot for the 5-12.
Yeah.
That really is. Look, and there's no disrespect to BYU. BYU might have beaten both of them.
They might.
I'm not. BYU is undefeated, and they've got 2 really nice wins at home. But the point is, if you're looking at the 4 that are getting byes, it feels like BYU is the weakest of the 4.
Right.
That's all. Now, again, does Miami have wins as good as BYU? No. Not that I know of right now off the top of my head. That the Florida win is there. I mean, so really we're sitting here automatically going, well, BYU's the weak link. Why? They're in the Big 12. The ACC's not a juggernaut last time I checked.
Well, and the ACC is positioning itself to only get 1 team in if Miami runs the table because right now SMU's 13. They are right now the matchup for the ACC championship game. And it doesn't look like a ACC loser in the case of SMU would get in. So in a weird way, the best case scenario for the ACC would be for SMU to beat a undefeated Miami. That way, SMU's in regardless because they're the conference champion, and then Miami will get an at-large. because that kind of seems like the only way they'd get more than one team in right now.
Yeah, and now I don't see the scenario the Big 12 gets more than one at all.
I don't either. Again, you got a lot of those teams in the teens, and that conference has been very topsy-turvy. Iowa State is the only other team. They have one loss. BYU has no losses. So a matchup between those two in the championship game where Iowa State beats an undefeated BYU, maybe. Because, again, the conference champion gets in regardless, and say BYU loses by 3 points to a previous one-loss team, maybe, but I'm not holding my breath on it.
You know who else has got an outside shot in the Big 12? The Deons.
Yes, they do.
Which I think is quite hilarious and interesting, that the Deons are sitting where they're at right now. And what's funny is no one's talking about them like they did last year when they stunk.
No, and look, there were a lot of people that were wanting Deion to get embarrassed because, look, he's very loud, very brash, and last year they underachieved. Well, no, they didn't underachieve. They actually did better than people thought they were going to, but they didn't get to a bowl game, which, of course, was the primary goal for turning around that Colorado program, and people, who do not like Deion wanted to jump on that, but this year, after surviving North Dakota State in week number 1, we all remember watching that game and how close they came to losing that one. They're playing some good football. They're not perfect. I don't think they are good enough to win the Big 12, but they might get themselves to a decent bowl game and, could be looking at a 8-ish win season this year, which more than exceeds what people thought Deion was going to do. And now, of course, Shedeur and Travis, they're going to go off to the NFL, and we don't know what Deion's going to do, but for him making a bowl game, he can say, hey, I turned this program around and I was successful.
When Shedeur and Travis and Deion leave after this year, it'll be interesting to see where Deion goes. Now, Deion will leave if he has a better opportunity somewhere else. And he'll walk out of there because, let's be honest, it feels like he has built this whole thing just to stay as long as his kids are there. That's all. And the way he's built so portal heavy, has no desire to recruit. It feels like he's like, look, dude, I'm just here short time, not for a long time. And, if I walk out of here with an 8-win season, you go to a bowl game, I look really good on my way out the door, and I hopefully can turn this into something even better, whether it's on the collegiate level or the pro level. I think this is it for him in Colorado. I really do. I think he's going to parlay this bowl trip into something bigger somewhere else. He's going to try to. So we'll see.
And, I think the quick thinking for people is like, well, they run Norvell out of Florida State. It'd make perfect sense. As bad as the season's been, I don't think they're going to fire Norvell this year.
Well, it's a big buyout, number one.
It's huge buyout. They just gave him a contract extension after their undefeated ACC championship year. Now, is he going to be able to turn around? I don't know. But I don't think you pull the trigger on him this quickly.
No, but here's the thing. We've seen kookier things happen if you can get one of your own.
Yeah.
I could see them let's say Colorado wins 8 games. They go to a bowl game. There's this Deion wave going on in Tallahassee because, again, you stunk. Everybody's going to forget the 2 previous years when Florida State won double-digit games. What they're going to remember is this disaster of 2024. And guess what? One of our own just did a killer job in Boulder, Colorado. Let's go get him. I'm sure the GoFundMe page for the buyout would fill up pretty good for Norvell, and they would go try to get their boy Deion back.
It's funny. I had a buddy I used to work with, huge Florida State fan, and I remember when Travis Hunter flipped from Florida State to Jackson State to go play for Deion there. I asked him, I sent him a picture of Deion from his Florida State days. No caption, no context, and he sent back a very explicit tirade back at me, and he's like, essentially, Deion's dead to me. It's funny how that switch can flip, right?
Oh, absolutely. Deion will be very alive to your buddy. They could get him in Tallahassee. Now, again, would I get rid of Norvell after this year? If it were me, no. The 2 years before were really good. Really good.
They were. I think, and this isn't the only reason they're bad this year, I think you put too many eggs in a basket on a quarterback that wasn't wasn't going to do what you needed him to do.
Well, look, and this isn't second guessing. We talked about DJU going into the season. We said he's nowhere near as good as the last quarterback, Jordan Travis. And he wasn't. And we saw him play at Oregon State. We saw him play at Clemson. He kind of is who he is. And you saw him before he got hurt at Florida State. That's who he was.
Yep.
So you just went, and for some reason, I guess my biggest thing, if I were the people making decisions in Tallahassee, why did you evaluate that quarterback to think he would come in here and make plays when he never did that before to the level you need him to replace the quarterback that was making plays at a high level? That would be the biggest question I would have for Norvell. What did you see there, man?
Yeah.
Did you just decide that you heard his name before? Did you scout him? Did you turn on the tape?
Or was it the belief that, well, he's never played for me. He's
We
never
can
played
fix
in
him.
my system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the quarterback whisperer.
Yes.
I can fix him. I can get him in here, and he can play at a higher level. Because, look, every coach, if you're not coaching and believing you're the best coach in the country, you've already lost. So is that an element of like, well, yeah, he's rusty, but I can get him to the next level, and it just clearly didn't work to where they're down to nobody's been paying. Like for the first month of the season, Florida State was a story of, oh, can they keep losing? Now they just keep losing. We don't even pay attention to it anymore. I think they're playing Brock Glenn at quarterback now. I haven't watched him in a while.
I don't know who they're playing at quarterback. Could be Brock Bowers, Terry Glenn. John Glenn. I got no idea what's going on with. I stopped caring about them after they were like 1-4. They were done.
Well, there
it was
like
over.
It was almost, I don't know, the morbid curiosity of how bad can they be, and then after you watch them barely scrape by Cal and get dominated week after week, it's like, okay, this is kind of getting old now. I'll move on to something else.
They were painful.
I think they play Notre Dame this weekend.
I think you're right. Of course, again, in August, that looked like a game.
Oh, it's prime time on NBC. You know, they probably saw dollar signs with the ratings on this one. Not so much anymore.
No. All right, here's Ward Manuel, the chair of the College Football Playoff Committee. I want to hear this one first. We've been talking about the BYU-Indiana thing. BYU's resume is better than Indiana. It just is. But Indiana's ranked higher than BYU in the College Football Playoff. Here's Ward Manuel basically explaining the differences between Indiana and BYU.
Well, two great teams, like you said. I mean, Indiana, their strength of schedule is not as strong as BYU's, but what Indiana has done on the field, when we look at those games, they're winning by double digits, averaging 33 points a game, more than their opponents. They're solid on both sides, offensively and defensively. They're just a really, really great team, and so is BYU. And so as we contemplated, as we discussed, as we looked at everything, Indiana was ranked number 8 by the committee, and BYU is right behind them at 9.
Wow, that was a big word buffet of nothingness.
And they change it every single year. Last year it was the NC State guy. Has any of these chairs ever really given us an answer on anything? And Reese Davis will ask him 3 or 4 questions, and, I feel like he poses the questions in a way where that could elicit an answer, but we've never gotten anything good out of these guys.
Never will. That's why they're put there, to answer questions like that with nothing. Well, Indiana, they score a lot of points, and they beat up a lot of teams, and they're really good on both sides of the ball, but so's BYU. Next question.
Yeah. And they start, well, they beat so-and-so this past weekend, and they beat this team the week before. They start reading off the schedule.
Yeah,
like that's supposed to
pretty much
warrant anything.
More nothingness from Ward Manuel about Ohio State and Georgia. Also about if you lose the conference championship game. That's coming up next here on What's Trending at 2. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We roll till 3 on the game. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions here on the Halftime Show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head. Up until 3, we roll here on the game. Tomorrow, Elijah Campbell broadcasting live from Dillon Columbia Supply Company, 320 Orchard Drive in West Columbia. They are doing their fall open house. Lots of great stuff going on at Dillon Columbia Supply Company. So pop on out there between noon and 2. Elijah will be there. He'll call us a few times through the show. Let us know what's up at Dillon Supply Company. Again, 320 Orchard Drive in West Columbia. All right, we'll get back. Ward Manuel, the chair for the College Football Playoff Committee, continued to tell us nothing last night. Here is his next answer that's nothing about the difference between Ohio State and Georgia. Look, Georgia should be ahead of Ohio State. Let's just stop the nonsense. Georgia's got 2 really good. Look, I know Clemson lost to Louisville. If Clemson beats Louisville, Georgia's probably looked at maybe a little bit different because since Clemson got woodshedded by the Bulldogs, they had been cooking folks. But maybe the Clemson win isn't looked at as good as it was. Georgia went to Austin and manhandled Texas. Ohio State lost at Eugene and then beat Penn State in Happy Valley, which they do every year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I think the wins that Georgia has are better than the W that Ohio State got against Penn State. But I'm guessing the whole recency thing. And then plus, of course, Georgia Saturday stumbled and bumbled their way through a game against a Florida team they should have beat by 20.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Georgia thing comes down to game control because, yeah, they've beaten everybody with the exception of Alabama. Very nearly won that game, but they couldn't. They struggled to put away Mississippi State. Again, they were, on thin ice against Florida. They barely squeaked by Kentucky earlier on this year. They're winning, but not in spectacular dominant fashion. And again, Ohio State hasn't played perfect games. They survived a scare against, Nebraska 2 weeks ago, but all around their games have been a little bit more clean than what Georgia's played this year. And here's the thing about putting Ohio State at 2, because again, we go back to if things hold serve, Georgia would still be the number 2 seed because they would win the SEC. So this is almost in a way kind of like a harmless way to do it because in the grand scheme of things, you can't have another Big Ten team ahead of them if they run the table and win the SEC anyway.
Let's think about it. Ohio State at 2 ensures. Let's say they got to beat Indiana.
They do have to beat Indiana.
Let's say they beat Indiana and they go and they win the Big Ten championship. Let's say they lose to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game.
Right.
Would that knock them out of the college football playoff if they're a 2-loss Ohio State?
I don't think so.
I don't either. I think they're in.
Assuming they ran the table from this point out, they would go in, and assuming Oregon does the same thing, that'd be a 1-2 matchup. And let's go back to last year and the ridiculousness of Georgia going from being the number 1 team in the country to 6th after a 3-point loss in a conference championship game. That in of itself was so absurd. We wouldn't see something like that again here because the committee was pigeonholed last year saying, well, we have to drop Georgia. Well, they shouldn't drop that far, but they can't be in the 4, so we'll put them at 6. Like that's not going to happen here to where, again, let's assume Oregon and Ohio State went out. Ohio State loses, becomes 10-2 team. I don't know. They probably drop to maybe 5th or 6th. And it depends on what else is happening, what these other teams do, but they'd still be in a position to host, which is the most important thing here at the end of the day.
Yes, but let's get Ward Manuel's nothing answer on the differences between Ohio State and Georgia.
Well, they both had great wins in terms of on the road, Ohio State against Penn State this week, Georgia at Texas. But what we felt is in terms of the losses they had, Ohio State lost to number 1 Oregon by 1, and Georgia lost at Alabama, who's ranked number 11. And so that was really the difference. I mean, we're splitting hairs in terms of looking at 2 great teams.
And, I can actually kind of buy that answer.
Okay. Where they're at now, that Oregon's number 1 in the country and Bama's fallen to where they have because they have 2 losses. Okay, if that's a hill you're going to die on with that, I guess. But I thought that we looked at a body of work.
We're supposed to.
Again, let's just tell the truth. We want a Big Ten team sitting at number 2. Because we know that Georgia's going to, because if Georgia's at 3 and they win the SEC championship, Georgia's, like you said, is going to get the auto bye anyway. So now we can have 2 Big Ten and 2 SEC teams sitting in the top 4, most likely, in this thing, and they're going to whatever.
I talked yesterday about the chess pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the first rankings kind of tell you what the tone of upsets anywhere. This is laying the chess pieces in place because you have a Georgia at 3, Texas at 5, a Tennessee at 7. Where, well, guess what? They can't allow 3 teams into the SEC championship game. So, assuming, let's say Georgia beats Tennessee, Texas wins out, beats A&M and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? Georgia and Texas play for the SEC championship game. Winner goes. Loser, not going to penalize them by much, right? They're going to be in.
Right.
And Tennessee loses to Georgia. They're not going to drop from 7 unless they just get beat by 60. They're not going to drop from 7 all the way to 12. They'll still be, I don't know, 9th or 10th.
Right.
Alabama, if they win this weekend, in the elimination game against LSU, they'll probably jump back into the top 10. So it's really positioning all these pieces where it's like, oh, there's your path to getting 4, 5, maybe 6 SEC teams in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all about getting as many Big Ten and SEC teams in as possible because they're the big 2. Then you have the little 2, and then you have the group of 5 and a quarter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, your goal is to get as many of those 2 conference, get as many of their teams as you can get in as possible. And the way it's going to go is Ohio State, even if they don't lose another game to the Big Ten championship, they'll still get in. If they win the Big Ten championship, obviously they're in. If Oregon's a one-loss team that loses to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, guess who's also in? Oregon.
Yep.
Let's flip over to the SEC for a minute. We all think we know what we know, but we don't know. Right?
Right.
The loser of the SEC championship game, unless it's a 2, now this one's going to be interesting. Let's say a 2-loss team loses the SEC championship game.
I personally don't think you should be penalized for playing an extra game.
I don't either.
You are one of the top 2 teams in your conference. You've earned that spot. Yes, that's your 3rd loss, but I don't think that should ding you.
I guess here's where it goes. You should get credit for getting to the championship game of your conference. But if you get that 3rd loss, now how does your total resume look with that 3rd? You understand what I'm saying?
I look at it from this context, okay? Let's say, trying to use a good example here. Let's say it was Alabama that made it into the SEC championship game at 10-2. They lose to Georgia, where at that point in time, their 3rd loss would have been to what is the number 3 team in the country, which that makes sense. You know, based on our ranking, you were supposed to lose to them, right? So if Alabama is 9th or 10th, 8th or 9th at that point in time with that loss, can you really drop them that far for losing to a team that you were kind of expecting them to lose to? Does that make sense?
I get it in theory, but then the flip side is, okay, let's say Miami loses the ACC championship game to SMU. And let's say it comes down to Alabama losing the SEC championship game with 3 losses.
Oh,
and
now we're talking.
And Miami losing the ACC championship game with 1 loss. You shouldn't penalize Miami either, right? In theory.
You're almost getting into the exact situation we ran into last year with Florida State and Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Just saying.
Hey, man, I'm Team Chaos. Bring it.
I love it. Oh, I'm getting tingly talking about the chaos. And let's get to this really quick. The Ward Manual conversation about losers of the conference championship game, cut 28, Tyler.
We haven't talked about it this year yet. We have in the past, in the past couple of years, we've looked at it. And there's been different reasons and different ways that we've looked at it, Reese, as it relates to the outcome in terms of the ranking. We try not to punish, but we also are watching the games. And I think that's important for us as we deliberate to really talk about what we see as we go into it, not just they lost, but how did the game proceed and how was the outcome of the game and how was the performance?
Okay. I hope that all made sense. Because, no, it didn't. Halftime show, greatest day in the history of the world, next here on The Game. All right, we're going to get to the greatest day in the history of the world in a second. First off, if you haven't heard, Ashlyn Watkins is being reinstated of South Carolina women's basketball team. All the charges were dropped. Everything's been cleared, and now Watkins will resume practice starting, was it today, Tyler, I believe, or tomorrow?
I think so.
Yeah.
Positioning her to, I guess, return the Sunday against NC State.
Yep. So Ashlyn Watkins back in the fold for the South Carolina women. And, of course, you can hear that game against NC State right here on 107.5 The Game in Columbia. All right. Greatest day in the history of the world in this day in 1869, Tyler. 1869, sir. The first college football game was played.
That's right.
But if you look into it a little deeper, it really wasn't a college football game.
So the funny thing is, this is not only the first college football game, this is also the first collegiate soccer game ever.
Exactly, because this is so weird. Okay. It was more of an athletic competition between two universities, more akin to a soccer game. I'm reading from Wikipedia. The rules governing play were based on the London Football Association's 1863 rules. Are you ready for this? Now, when you watch football, what do they do with the ball?
They throw it, run with it, catch it.
Guess what they couldn't do in this game?
That.
The rules, the outgo of the London Football Association 1863 rules, Tyler, disallow carrying or throwing the ball, which goes the opposite of what football is. So it was the first football game.
Yep.
And the first soccer game collegiately. And by the way, Rutgers won 6-4.
That's a Big Ten score now.
I was getting ready to say, isn't that an Iowa game?
Well, they're in the right conference for it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, kind of looking at these rules, very, very far away from what we know football as today.
One other early, I guess this is the NFL. This is interesting. I'll get one more old school and then we'll move on. 1934, Joe Carter, I guess future Toronto Blue Jay and San Diego Padre. Joe Carter scored 4 touchdowns. And the great Swede Hansen of the Hansen brothers ran for 190 yards on this day in 1934 as the Philadelphia Eagles crushed the Cincinnati Reds 64-0. Of course, the Eagles played a baseball team. Of course, you're going to whoop them.
Swede Hansen was the one that wasn't musically gifted.
Right.
He couldn't grow long blonde hair.
No, he could not. All right. Now we'll move on to the world as we know it. On this day in 1981, Larry Holmes knocks out Ronaldo Snipes in the 11th round to retain the World Heavyweight Championship in Pittsburgh. I mean, Larry Holmes, I was never a huge Larry Holmes guy because it wasn't like a great class of heavyweights at the time. Holmes dominated the heavyweight division. He did. He was undefeated. But you never watched him and went, wow. Man, if that dude fought in the era of Ali and Frazier and Foreman, he'd be Jerry Quarry. But you can't pick who you fight. Larry Holmes did fight everyone that was around. They just weren't all that good. That wasn't a great era of heavyweights, but Larry Holmes, to his credit, and he held the belt for a good long time. Then he fought when he was older. Remember all those guys were fighting in their 40s. Foreman was fighting. So Holmes came back. The last I remember Larry Holmes, the hood of cars, chasing someone or something. That's the last thing I remember of Larry Holmes.
Okay.
I can't remember now what was going on. It was like some kind of crazy chaos.
Well, to be running over the hoods of cars, I would assume so.
Very bizarre. Very bizarre. Oh, this day in, 1995, Art Modell officially announces the Cleveland Browns are moving to Baltimore to become what would be the Baltimore Ravens. If you ever watch that press conference, Art Modell's eyes are looking everywhere because he's wanting to duck the sniper rifles that are coming at him because he's petrified.
How did this go down in Baltimore?
Oh, they were. Well, here, I'll tell you how it went. I was working in Youngstown, Ohio when this happened, which is an hour east of Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the two sides really quick. The Cleveland people in the city were like, oh, no, the NFL won't take our team. The NFL is going to step in. We're the Cleveland Browns. Jim Brown, Otto Graham, Paul Brown. We're an iconic franchise. They won't let our team move. So I did something I never do. I gave him a call. I said, guys, I'm from Baltimore. Let me tell you how this is going to go down. So I popped in and I said, look, your team's gone. The NFL doesn't care about your history. They don't care about your lineage. They care about a brand new stadium in Baltimore, Maryland, with a lot of luxury boxes and a lot of fancy bells and whistles that you now don't have in Cleveland. You want to get a team? You get one back by building a new fancy stadium, and you'll get a team back. That's what's going to happen to you. No one cared about Johnny Unitas and Gino Marchetti in the 1958 championship game with the Colts. You know what they cared about? Indianapolis was building a fancy dome stadium with luxury boxes. NFL doesn't care about you or your fans or your history or your lineage. They care about one thing, money.
At least they had the decency to not leave in the middle of the night this time.
Exactly. And then in Baltimore, it was interesting because fans in Baltimore didn't want to get a team like that because that's how we lost our Colts.
Sure.
Was leaving in the middle of the night to go to basically stealing a team.
Yeah.
Baltimore didn't want to steal a team, but the NFL was giving you no choice. The NFL was trying to make Baltimore part of D.C.
Yes.
Which, trust me, that ain't ever happening ever in the history of the world. Lost an expansion franchise to Jacksonville. Really? And then, so you were stuck to do one thing, steal a team. There was, I believe it was $200 million were sitting in the coffers in the state of Maryland. And Maryland then gave the NFL until December 31st of that year for somebody to take that offer. Cleveland took the offer. But the fans didn't want a team like that.
Yeah.
And really, the fans looked at that team as the Browns in purple uniforms until guess what happened?
The Browns came back.
No, they won a Super Bowl.
Oh, well, it didn't take long to do that. That's the funny thing, because when the Browns came back, it's like, okay, now we recognize the history of the Browns with the current team, and it's almost like the Ravens started anew by moving to
They're a brand new team.
It's weird.
They sucked away the history, right?
Exactly, because technically they were the original Browns, and the new Browns are what technically the Ravens should be. It's a mess.
Right, and I'll say this. And then in Baltimore, it's like, wait a minute, why didn't you leave our colors and our lineage and our nickname? Why'd you let those fools in Indianapolis take the Colt name?
Right.
And the horseshoe. To this day, I can't look at the horseshoe. Why did you let those people take that stuff, but you left Cleveland, their lineage and their history and all of their, their stuff?
Right.
So, yeah. So that's a little backstory on all. It was a mess. It's just a mess.
Interesting.
Because, again, if the NFL did their business correctly, none of this would have happened.
Of course.
You still have the Browns in Cleveland. Baltimore would have had an expansion team, and then you wouldn't have lost the Browns to Baltimore.
Or if you just go back in time, Baltimore would have never lost the Colts, and the Indianapolis would have gotten an expansion team.
There you go. But again, the NFL only thinks about right now and how much money they can make.
Yep.
That's why I say whenever they bring up any of this stuff about teams with stadiums, you'll lose your team.
Yeah. Look what happened to San Diego.
I mean, San Diego
Louis.
should have never lost their team. The Raiders.
St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis. I would say this too, I'll throw this. People think, they never do that in Green Bay. You think?
Ooh,
You think?
That would be an entertaining debate.
I will tell you this, Green Bay, you better continue to make that stadium modern every chance you can, because trust me, you fall behind, they'll take that thing from you in a heartbeat. All right, it's the greatest day in the history of the world. We have our Firehouse Subtext Hour coming up at 8:03. 404-6100, and also hand it off to Jay and Elijah for the post-game show. That's coming up next here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head on the game. Time to get our Firehouse Sub Texi Hour. Our buddy Jay Phillips is here for the handoff, sponsored by Little Pigs Alpine Road. And
Have you noticed there's a lot of food sponsorship in this final segment of your program as it leads to my program, and yet there's never food.
You know what I think?
No, that's seriously.
You know what? We need to figure that out, don't we?
Well, I mean, I don't. It's not my show.
You know, occasionally you make a good point. It doesn't happen a lot.
No, I mean,
But occasionally you make
Tyler's
sense.
accusing me of throwing everybody under the bus. I'm going to just keep throwing y'all, too, man. So my arms get tired.
By the way, you running for office next election?
I think you should. Because that whole filibuster a couple days ago.
Tyler, I've been running for king of the world for a solid 30 years.
See how that's working for him? He's not even king of his house.
You need a vice king in the world?
So,
Tyler will jump in.
I'll let you know. When I finally become king of the world, I will let you know.
Two-part thing. First of all, let's get our Firehouse Sub Texi Hour 803-404-6100. We got.
Nameless texter says, Terry, will they please take the Panthers away or at least the owner away next?
I'm going to tell you. Man, I've said this before. I think you and I talked about this on the halftime show when we were hanging together. There should be a criteria in the NFL, and they won't do this because Tepper's a bazillionaire. And Daniel Snyder hung out forever, and though he was I can't say that on the air, we'll get fined. There should be some mechanism
Snyder's
in place.
poor compared to Tepper.
I know. Snyder lives under a bridge compared to Tepper. Yeah. There should be some mechanism in place. If you are an embarrassment as an owner, and you're a meddler, and your franchise stinks, and nobody wants to come see you play, nobody wants to play for you, your own employees are only there because it's an NFL gig, there should be a mechanism in place where you get some kind of, all right, we're going to put you on double secret probation.
Call on me.
And then they get to take the franchise from you and sell it to somebody.
Call on me.
Jay Phillips.
Promotion and relegation.
For owners?
Yep. No, for the whole for the teams. Promotion and relegation.
But Ready, what it has to do is hit you in the pocketbook to where you're not getting the NFL TV money.
And it will.
So where are we relegating NFL teams to?
Well, just NFL
Canadian Football League.
Okay.
I mean, just let's go. Let's add 4 teams. Let's get to 36. We'll have 20 in the top. We'll have 16 in the bottom. We'll promote 4 and relegate 4 every year. And just like in England or France or Italy, when you get sent down to the second division, you lose at least, because they do. This is fact. Go look. Don't take my word for it. You lose at least half of your revenue.
I'll tell you where I'd love to do that, honestly.
And those owners will then go, wait, I'm going to make half as much despite what I've put in?
That's what I want to do to Major League Baseball.
Everywhere,
because there's no salary cap and there's no salary floor. And that guy that owns the Oakland A's, the Levi's guy, is worth...
No, the Gap.
The Gap, rather.
Yeah, the Gap.
The sell Levi's. He's one of the wealthiest owners in Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. That guy takes the money he gets when you do all the mess they do and their mechanisms of how they do, you give money to the poor teams. He takes that money, instead of investing in his team, he invests in his pocket.
Sure.
The guy's one of the worst owners in professional sports. If you hit him in the wallet and took away, let's say, half of his revenues, you know who's going to sell that team?
Yeah, him. Yeah, hit him in the wallet. That's why promotion and relegation work. I'm not going to sit here and get on my soapbox about it, but that's why it works, because it motivates the teams at the bottom to do all they can to stay in. And here's the thing. The reality is every year, 3 teams in England will be relegated. Mm-hmm. And the subsequent reality is that every year, 3 teams in England will be promoted because they work their tail off
to get back
in level 2 to come up, and then they get those revenues. And by the way, when you get relegated in England, I think it's this way for most of the big leagues in Europe, there's like a parachute payment too. Mm-hmm. So it softens the blow in the first year for what it is that you'll be facing when it comes to lack of revenue. But the motivation is all about the revenue. Period. And again, David Tepper, they're all motivated by revenue.
By the money. The only reason they own NFL teams are to sell them for triple their value later. They don't care about money.
The only exceptions are probably the Rooneys. Mm-hmm. And is it McCloskey, the Hallis family? I think it's Mrs. McCloskey
Chicago,
now. Because they have been
they're
generational. This is their business.
The Green Bay setup. The Hunt family.
The Hunt family has had their teams for 60 years.
They're football families.
Yes. And so
just like the Teppers.
But right. And again, the great irony of David Tepper is that for a little bit, he was a minority owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Watch what they do.
So was Truck Stop Jimmy.
It's almost like he just looks at them and goes,
Think about it.
That's not how it works.
You've got two goofs who own teams in Cleveland and in Carolina who should have learned from watching the Roonies. And they said, they don't know
what they're doing.
What I'm doing.
Yeah.
Screw those guys.
Just because they've won 6 Super Bowls.
What do they know?
Yeah.
I know what's up. You see my hedge fund?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Panthers have been to 0-2, and the Cleveland Browns
have never been to a Super Bowl.
And even in their old iteration, even the good Cleveland Browns that are now your Baltimore Ravens, even those Cleveland Browns never made it.
Last time they won a championship was 1964, I believe, with the great Jim Brown.
I'm glad my good friend John Elway had something to do with that. But
Yes,
I liked those old Browns, man.
I like the Bernie Kosar Browns and the Marty Schottenheimer Browns.
Yeah. Vinny.
The drive and the fumble.
2 of the great days.
I was going to say,
greatest days of my life, man.
Let's go with the post-game show, sir.
We got Alan Cole. We'll talk a little Gamecock football. Plus, Shane had some fun at Alan's expense yesterday, so we may discuss that.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
I remember that in the presser.
And I think they had that decision last night, so we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you down with everything?
Sure. It was great.
Sure?
Yeah. Because Missouri really should be in the top 25.
All those great wins. You ready to list them?
And Indiana should be behind Penn State. Because why not?
All right. Post-game show coming up with Jay and Elijah. Fine job, Tyler. We'll do it again tomorrow here on The Game.